Have you always wanted a part two of my favorite indie pattern designer companies? Well, watch this. Hi, my name is Sarah, and welcome to my channel, which is all about sewing and styling a handmade wardrobe. I thought I would do an update for one of the most popular videos on my channel, which is about my favorite indie pattern sewing companies. Since I made that first video, I've tried out some new companies, I've found a couple of new favorites. So I'm going to share 5 more pattern companies with you today, and I'm going to give you the pros and cons of each company. I will be putting up pictures of the garments that I've made from each of these companies, but I'm not going to go into detail in this video. If you have any questions at all about any of the pictures or any of the garments you want to know more about, please feel free to leave me a comment and I'm happy to answer you down there. Let's just get started. The first company I'd like to talk about is Megan Nielsen. I have made 7 patterns from this company. I've made the Banksia blouse a couple of times. I've made the Jara sweater a few times. I've made the Darling Ranges dress. I have sewn the Ash jeans, the Dawn shorts, the Flint pants, and the Hovia coat. In my opinion, this company specializes in wardrobe basics with some nice little details. They have a really nice wide variety of designs. At this point, I would say that I have sewn all of their patterns that I am interested in, but they do have a wider variety of patterns available on their website, so check them out if you want to see more details of what they offer. I believe they do also have some children's patterns and maybe some maternity patterns, so they're not strictly limited to just sewing for women. So what are the pros of Megan Nielsen? First of all, I think that they have a good size range. They have their regular sizing and then they have a curve range, and I'm pretty sure that the majority of their designs are in both ranges now. So I would say that they're pretty size inclusive, and I think that that's a really good thing in the sewing community. The second pro for Megan Nielsen is that she has really clear instructions. She uses illustrated instructions. They're very clear and detailed. I've never had any issues following instructions from a Megan Nielsen pattern. I do think that that is one of her strengths, that the instructions are very clear and very detailed. The third pro is that her patterns tend to offer lots of different views. So you get a lot of bang for your buck, because if you like the pattern, you could make many different versions and have completely different looking garments. I do think that is an advantage that Megan Nielsen's offers over some other companies that might just have one version of their design. Now let's get to some of the cons. First of all, Megan Nielsen patterns are expensive. I want to say they're probably one of the more expensive patterns that I've come across in the indie sewing community. Now they can still be a good value because they offer all of those different views. If you make, like say, the Jara sweater and you make all 4 views, then it makes it much more cost effective than if you were to just make it one time and decide that you don't like the pattern. In that case, as a one-off, it's pretty expensive. So for that reason, I don't think that I've ever purchased a Megan Nielsen pattern at full price. I usually try to wait until she has her Black Friday sale. But I'm not saying that her prices are unreasonable or anything, but it's just that they are at the higher end from what I've seen compared to other companies. My number 2 con is not really an issue anymore, but it is something that I encountered, and so I wanted to bring it up. And that is that her very earliest patterns had issues with the drafting. Now, Megan Nielsen was one of the first indie pattern companies that I ever came across, and I made both the Darling Ranges dress and the Banksia blouse. I don't even remember when. It was probably like in 2012 or something. I could be making that up, but it was a long time ago. And the original drafts of the patterns, in my mind, had some problems with the drafting. Specifically, from what I can remember, the Banksia blouse has a symmetrical sleeve cap, so it's the same on the back and the front, and that doesn't actually fit very well on the body because you need more ease in order to be able to move your arms in their sockets. It should not be symmetrical. So like I said, that was a long time ago, and she has since updated her patterns. However, one of the problems that I have with that is that I have the original versions of the paper patterns, and so therefore I didn't have access to the update. So for example, if for some reason I wanted to sew the Darling Ranges dress again, I would need to purchase the new pattern, and I don't like the dress enough to actually want to do that. So that's just, again, it's a minor thing and it's not even an issue anymore, but that is something that I didn't really like about the company. My third con is just that some of her designs aren't my style, and obviously that's a very subjective thing. I do tend to like the ones that are more basic, like the jeans patterns or the sweatshirt, but there's definitely just some of her other designs that don't really appeal to me. I feel like I've purchased pretty much every pattern from her line that I actually like up to this point, so I don't really feel like I'll be buying more unless she comes out with something new. But again, that's obviously something that's specific to each individual. It may not be a con for you. The number 2 company I would like to talk about in this video is Vicky Sews. I have sewn 6 of her patterns. I've sewn the Laura top, the Veronica tank twice. I've sewn the Milana dress, which is a free pattern. I've sewn the Andy dress, the Kim cardigan, and the Cheryl coat. So full disclosure, I am a brand ambassador for Vicky Sews, and so I do receive her patterns for free in exchange for posting about them on Instagram. However, if you guys have watched my videos before, then you will know that I am always honest with you about my opinions. And so I do have a lot of pros for Vicky Sews. I wouldn't be a brand ambassador if I didn't like the company, but I'm going to share with you some very honest and valid criticisms as well. If you check out the Vicky Sews website, I think that you will pick up very quickly that they have a really distinct point of view. Their designs tend to be very trendy, maybe a little bit younger, a little edgier. They do have a nice variety of designs available. I believe that they tend to release in collections. So for example, they had a somewhat recent collection that was a holiday thing that had lots of holiday party dresses and jumpsuits. But they do offer more everyday styles as well, and they also offer clothing for men and for children. So some of my pros for Vicky Sews. First of all, they're very fashion forward. So I know that it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I do think that Vicky Sews is one of the best companies to go to if you're looking to make something that you've seen in stores today. A lot of times, and it's very natural that it takes a while for things to trickle down to the home sewing community. Most indie pattern designers are not on the edge of fashion, but I would say that Vicky Sews is. They tend to follow trends very closely, and you will see a lot of their designs are in line with what is currently in stores. So if that is something that you are looking for, it can be kind of hard to find it somewhere else. But if that's what you're wanting out of your garment sewing, I would definitely check out Vicky Sews. Number 2 on my pros list is that they're very affordable. I think there's maybe some variation in the price, but it tends to be around $9 per pattern, and they are always having sales, and not just like 10% here or something. I've seen a lot of really good sales from 30% up to 50%. In addition to that, you can always use one of the brand ambassador codes. I do have my own code, Sarah, in all caps, that would get you 20% off, and don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure you can even stack coupons. So the price of the patterns is fairly low to begin with, and then if you wait for a sale and also stack a coupon code, we're talking about you're getting the pattern for maybe something between $4 and $6, which I think is really quite reasonable. Number 3 on my list is that the designs tend to be really detailed. Now that is actually both a pro and a con, but we'll get to the con side of it in a minute. A lot of indie pattern companies, in my opinion these days, really focus on beginners, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's always good to have approachable designs, but if you're more advanced or if you're just looking to grow your skills, it can be kind of hard sometimes to find something that you can really sink your teeth into. And Vicky Sews would be the pattern company for you because every one of their patterns is really, really super detailed in their instructions and in the finishing techniques. If you follow the instructions to the letter, you will end up with a really beautifully finished result on the inside and out. So for that reason, I don't think that Vicky Sews is the best for an absolute beginner. But if you are someone who is looking to expand your skill set, I think that they are a really good pattern company to go with because you will learn a lot from them. And number 4 on my pros list is their drafting. I think that the Vicky Sews drafting is really excellent. Now the patterns only do come in a single size, which is on the cons list, and we'll get to that in a second. But because of that, they are able to provide information on their paper patterns that other companies do not. For example, they have the seam allowance marked, which makes it really easy to make alterations. And they always mark the major points. So things like the bust point, the waistline, the hip line, the bicep line. I always have to make a full bicep adjustment for Vicky Sews patterns, and it makes it so easy when they show you where the bicep line is on the pattern to know that I can measure that line and compare it to my own bicep. They also provide the amount of ease that is intended in the instructions, so I can really easily calculate how much I need to add to my pattern in order to get me the ease that was intended. And I really appreciate those details. I think that it's something that all pattern companies should do really, and a lot of them don't. So now let's get to the cons. First of all, and this is a big one, Vicky Sews is not very size inclusive. Now they are actually pretty good at the lower end of the range. And actually, I've been thinking a while about doing a video on pattern companies that are really good for petites, but I'm just not really sure if that's something that my audience really wants to see. If there's enough of you out there who are interested in that, please let me know in the comments if that is something that you would like to see, because it's something I've been mulling for months and I just haven't quite done it yet. But back to Vicky Sews. They are relatively good at the lower end of the range, but they are not good at all at the upper end of the range, and that is a huge negative. They do offer 4 different height brackets from 5'1" up to 6 feet, I believe, which is nice and everything, but they just really could do better at the upper end of the range. And I have no pull with the company or anything, but I do hope that one day they will decide to expand their range because I think they're missing out on a lot of customers. My number 2 con for Vicky Sews is that they only offer single size patterns. Now, I do think possibly online you might be able to get paper patterns that have multi-size, but when we're talking about downloading patterns from the website, you only get a single size and a single height when you order. Now, there are some pros to this. Like I said, with the drafting, it's easier to have all of those markings because I think if you'd had multi-size where the bust point was marked for every single size, it could get messy really quickly. But the fact that they don't have multi-size is a downside. Even for me, I'm a different size in the waist and the hip. So if I'm buying a pant or a skirt pattern, I have to decide which one I'm going to go with. I always go with the hip and then grade up in the waist, but not everybody knows how to do that. And so it would be nice if they offered multi-size, but for the most part, they don't. And then my third con for the company, which was also on the pros list, is that they have too much detail at times. Now, like I said, it is really nice that they have all those beautiful finishing techniques and you will get a wonderful result if you follow them to the letter. But sometimes you just want to sit down and sew a t-shirt and you don't have to be messing around with clear elastic and seam tape and all this stuff. So to give you a concrete example, one of the patterns that I made as part of my brand ambassadorship is I made the Andy dress, which is a knit dress that has a polo style collar. And from what I can remember, the instructions tell you to interface both the upper collar and the under collar. Okay, I'm with you there. But then it also says to iron on seam tape around the edges of the collar, I think on both pieces. And it's like, yeah, if I did that, I'm sure that it would make a nice, stable, crisp collar, but at the same time, it's like, why? You know, I've already interfaced it. Why do I also have to put seam tape on it? It just can be a little bit of overkill at times, and I am admittedly a lazy sewist. So I will sometimes take shortcuts and just not do all of the steps because I just think it's a little bit too much. But again, if you're a newer sewist that doesn't have as much experience, you might not know when you can take shortcuts and when you can't. And if you look at the notions list and it's like 50 miles long and you need all these different things, you might get a little bit overwhelmed and frustrated before you even start. So for me, it's kind of one of those things where you have to be in the right mood to sew Vicky Sews patterns. If you want to really get in there and learn something new and try different techniques, then it is wonderful for that. But if you want to just sit down and sew something simple and quick and easy, it's probably not the right company for you. The third company I want to talk about is Paper Cut Patterns. I have sewn 4 of their designs. I've made the Estella top and skirt, I've sewn the Palisade shorts, I've made the Tula pants and shorts, and I've made the Stacker jacket. When you look at their website, I think you can see that they have a really distinct aesthetic, and you may or may not like that. In my opinion, it kind of leans a little bit towards natural or boho, lots of linen, lots of really flowy fabrics. And I think they tend to release in collections. They might do like a winter and a summer or something like that. And they mostly have women's patterns, but I think they have recently come out with a children's line, which is mostly miniature versions of their women's patterns. So let's get to some of the pros of paper cut patterns. First of all, most of their designs have a good size range. Just like Megan Nielsen, they do 2 separate ranges. They have a standard range and then they have a curve range. So I think their designs are generally accessible to a lot of people, and I think that that is wonderful. Number 2 is that they tend to use a lot of really unique sewing techniques. So for most of the patterns that I have sewn, even on very simple designs, they just have ways of having you construct things that are a little bit different than anything else I've tried anywhere else. And it seems like kind of small things at times, but it makes it really unique and interesting and fun to sew. The third positive for paper cut is that they have fun design elements. So I really like the way that they will use draping effects, seaming effects. To me, their designs just seem to be a notch up in terms of having a point of view, a little bit more flair, a little bit more of an aesthetic. They're not quite as basic as some other companies. Not that there's anything wrong with basics, I love my basics, but if I'm looking for something that has a little bit more of a look to it, paper cut is a really good place to go. Now let's get to some of the cons. When you go to their website, they have a very, very unique, distinct look to their photos and the models that they use. And although I think that that is good, it's good to have a consistent aesthetic, it is maybe a little bit overly styled to the point where it's kind of hard sometimes for me to picture what I would look like wearing these garments. I'm not sure that this is making sense, but when I look at the models, they just seem like models and they don't seem like real people. And I just have a hard time seeing myself wearing these garments in my normal everyday life. But of course, that's why social media is a wonderful thing because I can just go to Instagram and look at the hashtag and see lots and lots of normal people wearing their clothes. So it's really quite a nitpicky thing, but I do think that that is an issue sometimes that maybe some of the overly styled look of the photos can be maybe slightly off-putting. My number 2 con is actually not something I have experienced myself, But I have seen online from other people that there may be some issues with the fit and the drafting of the patterns. Definitely some of their older patterns. I've just seen reviews online from like Sewing Pattern Review that there's sometimes some issues with the patterns. I personally have not encountered that with any of their designs that I have sewn, but it's just something to keep in mind. I would definitely look up reviews before you make a pattern to see if there's any issues with that particular one. And then my number three con is, again, it's very subjective, but they do have a very focused aesthetic. And if you don't like that, then you're not going to like their patterns. If you don't really like the free flow, boho, natural sort of thing, then it just might not be the company for you. And so if their look isn't for you, obviously that's fine. There's plenty of other options out there. But I would say that this company is not for everybody by choice. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I do think that that could be a con for some if their overall design just isn't for you. Number 4 on my list is Green Style Creations. I have sewn 5 of their patterns. I've sewn the ballet top, the flare leggings, the stride tights, the tempo tights, and the pet pullover. Now, if you go to the Green Style Creations website, it will become very clear very quickly what they are all about. Their patterns are mainly focused on activewear or loungewear. They have a very casual look to them. Most of their patterns are for knits. Now, some of the pros for Green Style Creations, first of all, in my opinion, they are the best company at activewear. I think that they do that one thing and they do it really well. And with the popularity today of athletic wear as athleisure, I think that it's not just something that you wear to the gym. You can incorporate these clothes into your everyday life, and you can get really high-end looking results from using their patterns. The second pro is that they do offer so many designs for the whole family. So a lot of companies that I've been talking about, they have a few patterns here and there for men or for children, but Green Style really has a lot on offer for everybody. And like I said, I've even made the pet pullover, and so they have something for your pet as well. And I just think it's really nice if you're looking to make some athletic wear for, say, a man in your life or a child. You can feel pretty confident that you can go to Green Style and find what you're looking for. My third pro for Green Style is that they make sewing activewear approachable. And when I first started sewing my own leggings, I just found the prospect to be really scary. I just wasn't sure that it was going to hold up. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to sew that kind of thing at home. But their instructions are really good. They have really good advice for how to set up your machines properly. And I have managed to make myself activewear that I wear pretty much on a weekly basis. So it's held up really well. It's made sewing my own activewear and my swimwear much less scary. So I do think that that is one of the nicest things about the company, is that it makes something that can be a little bit frightening at the beginning very, very approachable. Now to get to some of the cons. First of all, they have a very specific market, which again is one of the pros. But if you're looking for a party dress, you're probably not going to go to Green Style Creations. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they are very specific. And so if that's not something you're interested in sewing, you're probably not going to use that company. My number 2 con is that their styles can be a little bit repetitive. So if you look for leggings, say, there's like so many different styles of leggings, to the point where it can be like, do I really need another leggings pattern? Now, each individual pattern I think is excellent, and I've bought several of them myself and I've made several of them. But maybe depending on how much variety you like, you really might only need one sports bra pattern or one leggings pattern, and you don't need all these different styles. And that leads me to my third con, which is there can be too much choice. So if you've never sewn leggings before and you want to go to Green Style because you heard good things about them and you want to just pick out a leggings pattern, there are so many different ones that can be hard to decide which one you should start with. And so I do think that that can be a little bit scary sometimes, as opposed to a company like Megan Nielsen, which only has one leggings pattern. So if you want to make leggings for Megan Nielsen, you have to just buy that one pattern and that's all you have. Whereas with Green Style, you're trying to decide between, like 7 different patterns. I mean, I'm making up that number, but you know what I mean. Number 5 on my list is Pattern Emporium. I have sewn 7 of their patterns. I've made the Meet You There, I've made the Endless Summer Tee, I've made the Keep It Simple Babe Tee several times. I've made the Everyday's a Weekend dress, I've sewn the Urban Pants, the Grab a Cup of Cardi, and the With Love poncho. Full disclosure, I am an affiliate for Pattern Emporium, and so if you click on any of the links and make a purchase down in the description box, I will get a small percentage of the sale. However, I don't receive patterns for free from them. I have purchased every single one of their patterns myself. So Pattern Emporium offers a wide variety of women's designs. They also do children's. Most of their patterns are for knits, and they do tend to be on the simpler or more basic side of the ledger rather than being really, really difficult. Now, some of the pros of Pattern Emporium. First of all, there are so many options that are offered in their pattern. This is not the company that just gives you one style. They often give you multiple styles in one pattern. A lot of their patterns have mix and match elements, so if you happen to own both of those patterns, you might be able to take, say, the sleeves from one pattern and put it onto another pattern. The designs are often drafted similarly, so you can take elements from one and add it to another. That's something that's pretty unique and not something that you see a lot from other pattern companies. So I do think that that is a huge pro. You get a lot of variety when you buy Pattern Emporium. My number two pro is that the patterns are very affordable. Now, normally I think the regular prices are usually around $10. And like I said, you get so many options from that one pattern. The Keep It Simple Babe tee, I think I paid $11 for that one full price, but I've sewn it at least 10 times so far. So that is just one of the best buys that I've ever made because I just keep making it over and over again. And all of my versions look completely different because there's just so many options with different sleeves and different necklines that you can make a wide variety of different tops from that one pattern. My number three pro for Pattern Emporium is that they cover the basics really well. So if you look at their pattern catalog, if you're newer and you don't have a lot of patterns in your collection, you could easily get a capsule wardrobe from them, especially if you like knit. You could choose your favorite knit dress, choose your favorite t-shirt, choose some basic loungewear pants. And because of all of the options they offer within each pattern, you could sew a whole wardrobe just with that small number of patterns. So I just think that they are one of the best for the basics. They're the kind of pattern that you could make over and over and over again without getting tired of it. And I truly think that they're one of the best out there in that particular market. Now, getting to the cons for Pattern Emporium, my first one is extremely specific and nitpicky, but it is something that bugs me. And that is that their instructions are not very desktop friendly. So the way that their instructions are laid out is they're kind of like a booklet form. They use photographs, and because I think they're trying to condense the information and making it a little bit smaller, I often have to zoom in on my computer. Now, I'm just not a person who prints my instructions. If I printed them out, I would be perfectly fine and I would not have this issue. But because I'm usually looking at the instructions on my laptop screen, I often have to zoom in, and it's just not the easiest to look at the instructions on a computer. Again, this is extremely nitpicky, and most people probably won't have this problem, but it is something about them that I don't really like. My number two con is that some of the styles are repetitive, which can actually be a pro or a con depending on your perspective. So for example, I won't get into specifics, but let's say they have like a tank top pattern, and then they have a tank top dress, which is essentially the tank top with a skirt put on it. And so if you're a person who really enjoys pattern hacking, you don't need to buy both patterns. You could just buy the top and then add your own skirt to it. However, if you are like me and you don't like pattern hacking, oftentimes I would rather just fork over the $10 to get the dress so that I don't have to do all of that myself. But it just depends on where you are. So like I said, I don't necessarily think this is a con, but it could be if you think that each design should be unique and can stand on its own. Maybe there is a little bit of repetition in their catalog. My third con for them is, again, maybe not really a con, but most of their patterns are really simple to sew, to the point where the majority of them I don't need to look at the instructions. And so if you are someone who wants to find something challenging that you can really learn new skills, maybe Pattern Emporium isn't the way to go. On the other hand, if you just want to sew something like a palette cleanser where you don't really have to think, it goes together really easily, then I think that they are really good for that. So it just depends on what kind of sewist you are or what kind of mood that you're in. But I would say that for the most part, the techniques that they use are not really something that's going to grow your skill set a ton. In case you missed my first video where I talk about 5 more indie pattern companies that I love, I'm going to put it up here so you can check it out.